In this video I want to show you how you can create your own unique synth patches with the Nordrum 3P. And I mean those types of synth patches that you would usually play on some real synthesizer with some actual keys. But because the Nordrum is a pretty cool instrument, we can do it on the pad, program the sounds on the pad, play them with sticks and have a lot of fun. The first thing I want to show you is the kind of classic analog synth type sound, and some would also call it subtractive synthesis, which means we use a waveform like those sawtooth or square waveforms, maybe you've heard about them, and shape them with a filter. And before even starting, I highly recommend to press Shift and edit all channels, because this way we can make sure that the sound changes we make are kind of adapted to all pads, because otherwise we have to do it individually and it really takes up a lot of time. And we have to first go to the spectrum wave menu on the bottom left side, and then with the lower parameter button go to the first section all the way to the left, the A section, because those are our classic analog type waveforms. Here we have a sine wave, like some triangle wave or some sawtooth wave. That's actually the one we're going to use, because most classic synth sounds have been made with sawtooth waves, and it's extremely easy because now you can just unpress the lower parameter button and make changes to this first thing here, which will add this kind of classic detune effect, which is pretty cool. And then you can also have some intervals like octaves, which is cool for some sounds, but let's start with just the detune function. And you can also shape the filter if you just go to this frequency thing here. And for the filter there are two parameters, like there's first of all like how bright the sound is. So if you crank this all the way up, it's going to be really bright, and if you crank this all the way down, it's duller, but you still hear some movement, because on the right side you see the filter envelope amount, and if this is all the way to 0, we just have a very static sound, but as soon as we increase this, we get this kind of attack. And also the type of the attack or the shape of it is formed with the decay that you can see here, but for now this 30 decay is actually kind of fine. And then you can just fine-tune those parameters, see how bright you want your sound. And now we should also already add a scale, so we can play some little melodies, which you can do by pressing pitch and pressing lower parameter again, and then just using whatever. So for now we could, for example, use some pentatonic scale. And this sound already sounds super pleasant and cool, and it's so simple to create. And you can turn it into whatever direction, because if you pitch it down and if you have the edit all channels selected, the good thing is that it will do it for your scale. So if you make a change here, it will just transpose the individual pads by this amount, and you don't all of a sudden have the same pitch everywhere. So if you bring it to some bass register, you can play some cool synth bass type sound. And here you can also experiment with octaves, because it sounds pretty cool to have like an octave. I have to see where 75 would be the octave. And here you hear that we get some overlap, so a good idea would be to create a mono group, and you can unedit all channels and then just press Shift and mono group for, this is a bit annoying, all the individual pads, because it means once we play a new pad, the sound of the pad you played before is going to be cut off. And especially for bass sounds, that's very great, because first of all, most of synth bass sounds are monosynths, which means they can't even create polyphony, so it's more realistic to do it this way. And also in the bass, if you have this overlap, it can create some unwanted resonances or unwanted kind of frequencies that clash. So this way you just clean up your bass sound, and it just overall sounds better. And also the decay is really important, so if you want a shorter sound, you just decrease the decay. Also have different types. And if you go all the way to the right, you can also have like individual decays for like that react to your velocity. So for example, if the first one is really high, you have some really long note. But if the second value is really short, you have some very short note if you play with a lower velocity. And This might be great sometimes if you want to have more access to some different expressions within one patch. And if you tune it higher, you quickly get those bright synth sounds, maybe going a bit into the direction of also like some synth strings. For example, here now I have it on the 51 for the detune, just some slight detune. And the filter looks like this. Some longer decay. You might also want to experiment with the L setting because it's kind of cool. And so you get this type of sound. And here it can be quite pleasant to not have those mono groups, so those notes overlap a little, so I'll quickly change it. And you can use exactly the same approach also for the A4 setting, because that's going to be a square wave. It's just a more aggressive timbre. And the A5 is just some other type of square wave, and the A6 is also a square wave, but here with the first value you don't change the tuning or pitch, you change the position of this wavetable, because with a square wave you can always use something called pulse width modulation, and this is what you can do here. So just see how it affects the sound. Let's move on to the next thing, which is the FM synthesis, and I love it so much, but it can be very weird at first. And also when I got the Nordstrom 3P for the first time, I was always confused by the FM algorithms, because if I would use one of those waveforms which you find under F, and let's quickly see them here, you're like, how on earth am I going to do something musical with it? Like, what is this? And there's a trick to make them work in a more controlled setting, and you need the filter for it, because the problem is if you create some default patch, you always have the kind of at least filter not open because it's at 0, but there's the envelope applied. So in the beginning you have a very strong motion, and because the algorithm for this frequency modulation is so particular, it just brings it out way too much. So all you need to do is bring down the amount for the filter envelope, and all of a sudden you have some more controlled sound. And let's add some scale so we can actually play some different pitches already. And now you can perfectly stay on the lower values of the filter and just fine-tune them, because you hear a very big change already between, for example, the amount 1 for the envelope and the amount 2. And also you can then see where you like the sound of the general filter the most. And once you have some kind of cool sound here, you can go back to the FM algorithm and then again change the first value, which is also some sort of tuning. And those are also actually some super cool sounds, not necessarily for melodies, but if you continue, you'll end up at some octave again at some point. Or actually a fifth. This is also really cool. And here, out of a sudden, it works, and you can continue, find the next octave. And then also see how it sounds like in different registers. And you get those nice metallic sounds, but you control them more. And it also depends on your algorithm, because this one is already a little more difficult to control. I think the F1 is really easy. Just has this super pleasant sound. I really like it, and of course you can also go into the other direction. And now it's totally up to you to just experiment here, and there are so many timbres to find, and it's so intuitive, because I mean, here you see the octave is usually like 7 up or down, and then the next one would be 14. But just listen, because even if it's not some octave, you sometimes get some super cool timbres as well. And then you just do the same. You can adjust the decay in the way I've shown you with the first example. You can add some reverb and all this kind of stuff. I just want to give you some cool examples of some FM type sounds which are from my sound pack, 50 useful Nord drum sounds that I just released some months ago. Just some selection of some, how I find, really useful sounds for making music with the Nord drum 3P, not only drum sounds but also synth sounds. And you can find a link down below in the description if you're interested. Also there's a little coupon code. And for example, here's a bass sound with the FM algorithm, so it's F1 at 38 and some frequency setting that, again, you see the envelope is really on some low intensity and you get some cool bass. Or something more dark and dystopian. So for example, here it's the F2 on 38 and the filter again, yeah, I often end up at 1 for the envelope and just a tiny opening for the first value. And another general thing for synth sounds that you can try is to add some drive. So for example, with this sound, I actually added a drive of 50. And you always have to listen to what works. Sometimes you can just make the sound a little warmer by adding a drive of maybe like 11 or 12. But sometimes if you want to go into this kind of dark direction or want to have something very intense, just try 50 and maybe it's going to be a cool fit. And by the way, if you're also a bit confused by all those synthesizer terms, I mean, now for the Nord drum 3P, you might understand what you can do, but you still have no idea, like what is FM synthesis, what is subtractive synthesis. I just want to warmly invite you to check out a class that I made, and you can find the link down below in the description, because there I explain in under 1 hour basically all basics of synthesizers. So if you're completely new to this, or you at least heard the terms, but you're just confused what it really means, this is a class that can explain everything to you in a very easy and accessible manner. So you're just warmly invited to check out this link that you can find down below in the description. So as a third example, I want to show you something atmospheric, because if there's one downside to playing synth sounds with drums, it's that we always have some super short attack, because we're in the end playing some percussive instrument. So how on earth would we achieve some long attack and like some swell or something that just isn't there right away? And with the normal settings, you can't do it because you only have a decay, but not some attack setting. But what you can do is use the reverb on full amount and send in whatever sound you want. So let's try here, for example, with a reverb setting of, let's take the P4 this time. Maybe I'm always going a little to the minus to make it a little less bright, but it's totally up to taste. And then select a reverb amount of 50. So now, just with the default sound, actually this is some super cool industrial sound. Let's add some pitches again, or actually some scale, I mean. I mean, the attack is still there, but at least if you play a bit with those waveforms, you can, for example, use a super simple sine wave and also play a bit with velocity and make some little rolls, for example. Create some super pleasant atmospheres. And here it's also super fun to work with the effects, because I've shown you the drive already, and you can also experiment with adding some distortion. But in this case, it makes the sound more present. Let's maybe try the sample reduction. Kind of gives you those glitchy overtones, which can be quite cool. Because often those sound too aggressive in like a normal context, but here you can just really experiment. Ring modulation maybe. Oh, nice. And those are just my favorite approaches. Maybe you have some other approaches that you like to use, and you're warmly invited to share it down below in the comments. Also, if you tried those ones, be warmly invited to share which one worked the best for you or gave you some cool results. And otherwise, I just link you to playlists here with more content about the Nord drum 3P that you can watch now or later. And apart from that, I wish you inspiration with whatever it is that you create, and hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye!